Chomsky more than any other writer. Although there are a couple of others also. There are many others basically. Like there are philosophers like Pierre Bourdieu, the French philosopher, the German living philosopher. I forget his name. I just used his work and uh, also refuted a few of his arguments, which didn't sit well with my examiners in Germany. So, and he's considered to be the only living philosopher right now. Enormous body of work on communication. And also there are people like Marshall McLuhan, the literature professor, who also is considered to be a media specialist with his books like Gutenberg's Galaxy and the Medium and the Message and these terms. Also terms like terms that we know, like the global village and ideas like that. But I choose Chomsky and his work because it's commonplace. It's not meant to be scholarly, although Chomsky is a big linguistic scholar, but his work basically in this area is giving everybody an understanding of how the media works and how media supports freedom of thought or otherwise. Uh, One important issue is that we think that media are one of the major instruments that could support freedom of thought and expression, and also support a transparent society, and also support the strengthening of democracy and all these ideals that we have. Chomsky says otherwise. Uh, and Chomsky has very strong arguments for that. One of the major contributions of Noam Chomsky is his book, Manufacturing Consent. Manufacturing consent was initially an idea which was given by the famous American writer in 1920s. I forget the name again. The book was Public Opinion. He wrote this book, Public Opinion, but Chomsky and his usage are different. Like uh, the earlier writer uh, focuses more on how consent could be managed to steer public opinion. Chomsky, on the other hand, gives you the idea of the problems that manufacturing consent brings to democracy. So it's really interesting, and it's really good that in modern times we have been able to get all these materials and ideas that can simplify ideas of Chomsky, because otherwise, if you read the books, these are really difficult. Like Chomsky is a very difficult writer to read. You can't read him that easily because he's very complex, and he's basically a philologist. So his use of language is different than the way we use it. So this video that I had shared with you earlier, and since I know that most of you would not have had the time to watch the video, I'm sharing it. And even if you can't hear the voice, I'll be sharing this with you uh, in so in a recorded lecture. So even if it's not audible right now, it will be useful if you listen to it. And I'll advise you to listen to it, not for my sake, but for your own sake, because this will be useful for you during your final exam. Okay, so I'll play the video. Just inform me in chat box if you can hear you. In case you can't hear this, and in case you can't hear it, don't worry, because what I'll be doing is that I'll be playing part of it and then explaining what Chomsky means by that. And when you listen to it in the recorded one, so you will have both the versions, okay? Just let me know in chat if you can, if it's audible. But if it's not, don't worry. Okay. So did you hear this? I think I have the answer over here.
So it's
I,
not audible, but we can read the subtitles.
okay, perfect. That's good. But when you listen to the recorded lecture, you will have it, and then you will have this discussion. That's why subtitles are so much in vogue right now. And so here is what Chomsky says, that the question is that who controls real power. And Chomsky says that to understand any society, you have to understand who has control over financial and political resources. And he says that in the age of what we call market capitalism, it's the conglomerates and the big corporations that have the resources and also the control of resources and also the money to influence political system, that they are in a dominant donor role for all spheres of life, including our way of life, like culture also. Because we have this misconception that we have a cultural realm that is beyond the control of what we call the capital. And this is also one of these major discussions that when we sit and talk and we say, we have lost our values. Basically, we didn't lose our values, but the world ruling and designing the values has changed. And for that very reason, we don't see the values that we have in our heart functioning in our everyday life. Like we most of the time talk about our own traditions, and our own traditions are there uh, in theory, but in practice they aren't, because your way of life has changed because of the control and dominance of political capital, which is controlled uh, by the big industrialists, by the big, in Pakistan also the feudal industrialist complex, as we can call it. But the feudal system is just a system of power. It doesn't have money. It doesn't have any global uh, reach. Like it's just like Shah Mahmud Qureshi serving as the foreign minister of Pakistan is no match to Mia Mansha, for example. He is just simply a local political player. So and many others. So this is what Chomsky is saying, and he says that uh, even laws are designed, and it seems very Marxist, but he's not a Marxist at all. And he says laws are designed to serve those interests. So is the media, because media is controlled by the conglomerates. In the next few minutes, Chomsky explain how does all this happen. Yeah, this is one of the very important aspects of Chomsky's views. Uh, like the question is that whose consent is to be manufactured? Like we say that the whole system is designed to make people behave in a certain way that serve the interests of the big corporations and all the money in the world. So Chomsky divides the people whose consent is manufactured through propaganda, through given partial truth or exaggerated reality, he says the 20% of those are the educated, articulate class, like people like myself or yourself. These are the people whose consent is ensured through indoctrination, like through the education process. You start schooling and it's one kind of school, and you go in and you start educating and you are shown etiquettes and things like that and this and that, and you just move on. Somebody says the poem in the morning and somebody listens, and then there are classes and structures and everything, and then you move into universities and you talk within certain spheres and you think that you are aware of what's going on, but in fact you are in a stream of indoctrination where you get into a shape which might be a dissident shape, like Ammar Ali Jan, for example, which might show that you really don't like this system to exist, but you don't know that your role is also very important to ensure that there is an illusion of freedom, and that you are talking about issues which might uh, affect certain discourse patterns, but don't affect the larger working of the social, financial, political, and cultural system, that it remains intact. And that's how it's all done. But there is another 80%, the bigger size of the population, about whom it is ensured that they don't have any idea of what's going on. And you can see all these people who unleash their anger on social media every day. Like recent developments are like the prime minister saying that the mafia is not letting him work, and he doesn't mention the mafia, which is his longtime friend Jahangir Tareen. So, and then there are these different statuses. I stand with Imran Khan, I stand with you, Skipper. And we don't get that basically what's happening is it's the same people. Like these were his closest allies. And now they are the mafia. And even if you get beyond that debate, you will be stuck into a debate of Nawaz Sharif, Imran Khan, Bilawal stuff, you know. So if you look at the way you are thinking and behaving, you are moving in circles without knowing the real problems of the society. And that's where we lose our values. And that's where most all the 100% become similarly ignorant thanks to the social media. Yes, and here Chomsky explains his propaganda model, and he says that within the system of journalism, there are elite media outlets like New York Times, Washington Post, and CBS News, the same as we have Geo or ARY and Sama and all these. In newspapers, there's Dawn, Express Tribune, Jung, which are, I don't know, I don't watch much of these. So these are basically the trendsetters, and this is what they do. At national level, they make the selection of topics. So they, like Hamid Mir's program gives you a relevance of this is the most important topic of the day, and you say, okay, let's talk about it. He talks with these four guys, and then you start talking about it, or many others, Wasim Badami, Amir Liaquat, whichever your choice is, basically. He's also the center of debate right now. And then the rest follow. So their first step is the choice of topics. Then ensuring sound bites in news, basically, because of the use of technology. So every bigger outlet has more access to technology, and technology needs money. So meaning there is more capital involved in the news production process than the weaker organizations. And they have to follow suit because they don't have those resources. So the elite media, by selection of topic, by restricting the debate, by showing concern, and also uh, by focusing on certain areas, whereas neglecting others, this sets the tone of a everyday debate, and they make sure that that debate is in favor of the sources of their capital. And then there is this very important point, that historicity, basically. So all the things are considered to be in historical context. And we watch this part of the video, and then I'll explain to you. Okay, now here is what's the next important step. Like it says that New York Times creates history. Every newspaper, every media organization, especially newspapers, create history. They have a historical record. Like Dawn has archives, for example. So if you want to discuss something, they will just bring in something from 1960s and say, here it is. This is how it happened. And the problem is here that we are not understanding a larger philosophical debate in in history, and that is whether history repeats itself. Most of the media organizations in favor of the status quo tell us that history is going to repeat itself because something like that has happened earlier too. But that's not true. Historians are not on the same page when it comes to whether history is repetitive, it's circular, or whether it's linear, that it just moves on and nothing happens again, or whether it's spherical. Pakistani historian Mubarak Ali says that it's like a spiral, like it moves on, but every time the circle is broader. So it doesn't repeat itself. Every society, every event has a past, but it doesn't really happen in the same way that it happened again before. Like recently, there was this news clip circulating on social media, a 1970s news clip where some government has said that they will take action against uh, uh, sugar hoarders, and said, okay, we are busy doing it for at least for the last 50 years. It is going nowhere. Like this is an oversimplification of the problem, but it works at times. Like people are sharing it and they say, okay, we don't have any control over these guys, we can't do it. That might be true partially, but again, we are living in two different worlds. Like it's not the same as the 60s or the 70s. It's a very different world. The amount of capital involved, the degree of influence that these people have is different. Not being able to control them is very different from not being able to control those. Like that's how it works. And let's move to the other part. Like here, it's very important to understand that whenever we think about media, we think about media, most of the media, the mainstream media, as a liberal force. Chomsky says that's not true. It might be a liberal force, but these are kind of the two sides of the same coin, controlled by the same uh, number of people. Okay, okay. So uh, when we say that media is liberal, we have to understand that it's a leash which is different. Like there are to, like as Chomsky says, that if the media is liberal and they are outrightly against, they take an adversarial position and they don't accept anything from the government or the power structure, are they planning to go or get out of the planet? No, there are limitations. So the media is go thus far but no forward. Like they have limitations and they don't go beyond limitations, but viewers or audiences, we who are sold to them, believe that they are following in the footsteps of the giants who are for liberal democracy, freedom, equality, transparency, and all that. So most of us, in the illusion of following the liberal tradition, follow people on the media who are not, in fact, liberal, but they have kind of a semblance of liberal credentials. If anybody wants to study it further, I'll advise them to read Pierre Bourdieu, the French sociologist. He wrote about that. Anybody who had interest would really understand how it works. Okay. So we're, oh, this is going somewhere else. From Chomsky into that. Okay. So we are running out of time, but we have, I just want to sum up the last part of the of Chomsky's debate. And here he again goes to what we discussed the day before yesterday, that media is a corporate entity, and it's owned by even larger corporations than itself. And when you ask the question, who owns the media, it's a stupid question according to Chomsky, because it's like a question, who owns General Motors, who controls General Motors, and he says the ones who own it. And in the same way, the ones who own the media control it. So the illusion of this or that journalist working in the media is an illusion in itself, because the owners who want to earn money and who also want to get into an elite club where they can earn even more money is to understand. Like we always see that when they are showing poor people or the problems in everyday life, like Iqrarul Hassan and people like that, we say, okay, they are working for us, but not, because if they stick to the poor communities in the society, they won't get good advertisements. Like I mentioned it in the earlier class too, that I worked for the DW, which had a 300 million euros budget, and out of that I was maintaining kind of 3 million. And once the German government said this is too much money going in to a government broadcaster, so they could seek advertisers. And here comes the investment from Mercedes-Benz. They said, okay, we'll just pay all 300 millions a year. Don't worry about that. We'll take over. And then the German government said, okay, then we are giving a major international state broadcaster to one motor company. And they refused. So they said, okay, whatever the charges or expenses are, we'll pay. So, so it's like, you can't, if you remain a community broadcaster, you will also always be showing advertisements of bubble gums. But if you want to show Ariel or Mercedes or GM or stuff like that, or Toyota or Honda in Pakistani context, you have to grow richer. You have to attract the elite audience. Now, elite audience normally don't watch you. You have to serve their interest. Once you serve their interest, you get the money to run it. So the illusion of media serving us is wrong. And the last point, when Chomsky says that if you are a voice of dissent, you'll be excluded, just like you will be nobody. Chomsky himself is one of the great examples. He was never given a chance by any mainstream television channel or media in the US to speak. People said all sorts of things about him. He wanted to respond to those. The same happened to Edward Said. People accused him. He responded, but he was never given time to talk about all the allegations against him in the mainstream media. So that's the reality of the world that we live in. So we are running out of time. I'll just go into attendance. And if we have more time, so we can then discuss some of the issues. I hope that I could, yeah. So it's here the student attendance. Okay. This thing is slow. Okay, let me pause the recording.